Hello and welcome to another Infinity the Game Battle Report. For those following along, the Adepticon update dropped last night/this morning Australian time and included not just the expected updates for Morat Aggression Force and some other sectorals, but also a variety of rebalances to other models kind of across the range, and of course the full Fireteam rules update. Now this has drastically changed how a wide variety of factions play, and it actually cracked the game right open. I've already seen a whole number of pretty spicy hot takes and frankly pretty bad hot takes, despite intentionally keeping myself away from the Yuching subforum. And I don't really intend to add to those now. This is just a game. This is my first chance to play with the new Morat Aggression Force against the almost equally new Ramah Taskforce. Both of these Morats have been heavily reworked, and Ramah have had some subtle but really interesting changes that make them probably one of the more changed sectorals while still keeping a pretty interesting and unique identity. So let's have a look at them. We played supplies for this, and I'll show you my lists. So this is the list that I took for Morat Aggression Force in this scenario, and this is built around functionally just a test bed concept. This is not a good list, or at least it's at best a mediocre list. It's just trying a whole bunch of things that I wanted to try. I prioritized putting in profiles that I hadn't had a great deal of chance to try previously, or which were things that are like returning and interesting and caught my mind. So in the first combat group, we've got 3 Datarazi who can Haris team now. I didn't actually expect to Haris team, but I would end up duoing at least 2 of them just for the ability to gain cover early in the game. And of course that Zerat with the souped up combi rifle that I noted in the previous video. I was really keen to try her and she did not disappoint. In the primary combat group, which never mind that it's group 2, it was just easy for me to organize things that way, we've got the returning and wonderful Osnat fire team. So this is better than ever in that it can now, not just do we see the return, the long-awaited return of the Osnat who makes Gakis and Predators regular, but also now you can wildcard into this if you need to save combat group space. So I have Kornak in that link, which means that it's a very, very cheap link that is generating 7 regular orders with 5 combat group slots. We've got 1 other Haris. Morats can run 2 Harises. There are a small number of sectorals that can do that, and Morats are one of them. Morats also have one of the most flexible Haris and core team setups, which kind of reflects the fact that they are the most heavily militarized, professional, all work together kind of army in the game. And in this case, I tried out the Yaogat Multi-Sniper +1 Burst, Haris linked with a Dartok Hacker, and the Kaitok Uber Heavy Infantry, which I ran in my previous game, but didn't really get a chance to strut his stuff. Because I hadn't used them at all before, I've also got a Tyrok with the Skurgot Brute, which I've never played that profile, despite the fact it's been out for a while. And then one of the unexpected and totally new models, the Rindak Paramedic. Now these are no wounding cap, structure, like remote heavy infantry with forward deployment and some really interesting rules actually, including dodge -3, which means when they dodge, they impose a -3 on their opponents in any face-to-face rolls. But really what it's here for is forward deployment, generally good stats, although only BS12, a burst 4 multi-rifle, and a burst 2 paramedic kit. In supplies, that was going to be particularly useful, and my plan was to reserve drop it alongside the Zerat as a basically as a reserve, a decent infiltrating-ish reserve squadron, and especially planning to use Kornak Strategos to keep them as safe as possible, because neither of them has a marker state, so both of them are kind of susceptible to being counter-deployed. If the Tyrok, who is also forward deploying, draws out enemy aggression or counter pieces, then that's fine. I'll deal with that. It's more expendable, particularly the Brute. Generally, though, this is just a whole bunch of things that I wanted to test that I could more or less fit and could play supplies. My opponent is a returning player. He's been actually out of town for a while, and it is great to have him back. Those are his Ramah Taskforce that you saw in the intro picture, and he played this list. So on prime display here is the fact that Zayden can now join Ghulam links and count as Ghulams. This is actually really big. These kind of troops are much rarer in this version, in Infinity N4 in 2022, March, April, etc. moving onwards, than they ever were before. Before you had lots and lots and lots of wildcards, and the value of that is all diminished radically. The Kamau, not radically actually, the value of that has diminished a little, but enough that players will respond to it. The Kamau, the Orc, the Grenza, all of those pieces, the Riot Girl, all of those pieces in cheap line infantry core links are not as good as they used to be. They don't quite get as much ballistic skill. But Xeoden, in addition to being able to join Gulam links now, count as Gulam, which means that you get 100% of the available fireteam options, fireteam bonuses, in that Gulam link. It also really helps that Gulam, although they're like very slightly pricey, they're cheaper than, say, Morat Vanguards, but they're more expensive than Alguacils and Moderators. Gulam have some of the most interesting troop profiles in the game online infantry. We've only got 2 of them here, but we've got a number 2 Gulam with a Panzerfaust, and the NCO Gulam with grenade launcher, smoke grenade launcher, and NCO for a very cheap price. It's backed up by a Xeoden Doctor as a Xeoden heavy machine gun and Layla Sharif. Now, I think for my money, I would probably have trimmed this link a little bit. That Xeoden Doctor could feasibly be a Gulam Doctor, although there is genuine merit to doctors that regenerate, since obviously they can't recover themselves. And I think I would probably have preferred Layla Sharif to be just a cheaper Gulam hacker who can actually use non-KHD programs. But she isn't that much more expensive, and she adds another gun at medium range to the list that can fight outside of the heavy machine gun's range bands. So I kind of see that. The other big element in the first combat group is the Tariq Mansouri Namur Quarij Haris. Now, the Quarij has chain of command to back up the fact that Tariq is the lieutenant and is going into danger. And we have the awesome new Namur Tactical Awareness Breaker Rifle profile. Now, Namur in particular got kind of a glow up. They were previously the super soldier program that probably saw the most love, the least love, taking solid second fiddle behind, especially the Mukhtar, but then to a lesser extent, the parachutist. I don't even remember their names. The Berserker parachutists / infiltrators. Now they've changed from having 1 wound, no wounding cap, and Armor 2 BTS3, and bioimmunity. They've lost bioimmunity, but they've kept total immunity, and they've gained Armor 2 BTS6 and 2 wounds, and like at no points difference, basically. They've also got CC attack +1 burst, which is enough to make them genuinely good in close combat, which is really nice. They've kept kind of everything else that was cool about them, and they've gained a tactical awareness profile. So with the EMCCW and everything else that's going on, and the D-charges, Namur are a profile to watch. They're still very expensive, but this is a 13 order combat group, and it can spend the majority of those orders very efficiently. The list is rounded out by 2 Fanus remotes, and then the second combat group is just 2 camouflage markers. A Beast Hunter for 15 points, a very nice addition to Ramah Taskforce, and then a Tuareg Mine Layer. Now, if you made some trims and some cuts and you moved some things around, I think you could feasibly expand this second combat group out. It would be fantastic to try and fit Cum and Johns, for example. There are a few different options, but as is, this is a fantastic example of how Xeoden can fight in, and the Haris team can fight in modern Ramah Taskforce, and a few things come up about the game that were particularly interesting. So let's jump in. So this is the table. I actually won the lieutenant role, and I elected to deploy second on the side that you can see, purely for the reason that I actually was struggling to get some proxies together because I'd failed to pack a couple of miniatures. My opponent elected to go first, which is not surprising. And supplies is one of those scenarios where I think I prefer to go second and deploy second a little, but you really can choose to just step on the gas in this one. You've got to, if you do, you have to really balance your combination of offense and achieving objectives, because you can be in real trouble if you just try to step on the neck, don't do enough damage, and your opponent is able to rejoinder and then also start seizing objectives. So, one of the things I noticed almost immediately as I began to deploy is that I had not packed enough gun. This list was like full of things that were cool and spicy to try, but which I just didn't have enough firepower, but we made do. So how we've deployed is, we've got a smattering of Datarazi. One is over here, and then there are 2 over here that will end up duo just to be able to take cover. And then we've got the Haris over here of the Kaitok, the Yaugat, and the Cyberbully. I forget, the Dartok. Now, this is not necessarily ideal positioning, but the link will be able to move up and over this through this corridor here. But really, the Yaugat is the only thing I have resembling a hard ARO, and I'm sort of concerned about it. By the way, I'm telling you my deployment first, but this was all in response to the Ramah Taskforce deployment, which we'll get to. We've got our 1 Ikadron Hing down here, and then the Osnat core is all kind of set around in this place. Their plan is not to move until well late into the game. They are an order battery for other pieces until the time comes to attack. I'll pause now and actually do the Ramah Taskforce deployment before we go into my reserves and where the Tyrock is sitting. So on the Ramah side, we've got a big whack Ghoul Fire team over here. And then we've got what was obviously going to be the Haris team. And the reason why I said it was going to be obvious is that Tariq didn't deploy, but Ramah had a Whip 15 Lieutenant, and I didn't see Whip 15 models on the table. So the Namur and the Quarij are hanging out here, and then there are just some camouflage markers in this spot here. So I've deployed kind of to respond to all of that, and my Tyrock Hunter has come down here and here. I would probably like a slightly more aggressive defense over these supply boxes, like a Zerite Mine Layer would be excellent, or even just a tougher Overwatch piece. Although I'm not convinced there is anything in Morats, apart from maybe just a Raicho that you want to foul guts on eventually, that stands up to that Zeta and HMG. It's rolling 5 dice on 18s against basically anything that you have. Kind of, there are some mimetism pieces potentially that you could use, but it is not easy for Morats to contest that. So this is the sacrificial piece. If something gets preyed on, I'm willing for the Tyrock and the Jawbrute to die. They've got Dogwood, maybe they can go out on the way and do some damage on the way out, but that's kind of sacrificial. Then Tariq pops down, and these camouflage markers, etc. are all here. So I deploy the Zerat over here, and the Paramedic Specialist Heavy Infantry over here. Now there's a couple of reasons why I'm doing that. The first is that the Paramedic has got a sensor, and their camouflage markers are all in this space here, so potentially I can reveal them all and do something useful. Secondly, it's an easy run for him up onto this building and then to grab this objective. I've also got the Nano Espionage, not the Nano Espionage, the Vaccinate the HVT classified. I can't remember what it's called. Inoculate the HVT, and his HVT is down here near one of the mines. Finally, I'm feeling the Zerat's exposure pretty heavily here. I know, yeah, okay, listen, she's potentially at risk from this camouflage marker, which is probably a Beast Hunter, but literally all my opponent has in these combat groups are this combat group is the 2 camouflage markers, so I kind of take that as a calculated risk. And if nothing else, anywhere I put her would be in danger. Like if she pops down here, for example, she can still get killed by those Ramah Taskforce goons moving up through this building. So my plan is just to try and only expose her to danger that at most will put her unconscious, and then bring her back with a Paramedic. So my opponent has first turn, and he does what I would call the standard play, the easy to make mistake play in supplies, which is that he steps on the gas with a whole bunch of orders to seize objectives, but doesn't actually use much of the rest of his pool to inflict damage. And you have to really finely balance this, and in particular you need to be really conscious if you're going first in supplies and you're trying to make this play. You have to be really conscious about doing damage to your opponent enough that when you attack and retreat with boxes, you're not just exposing yourself to a counterattack. And he does almost enough, but not quite. So the big core uses those 2 NCO orders to move up into this building, pop a doctor out, and we'll actually see that in this picture, with this great picture here of these Zeta moving out to claim the box. And then they kind of just fought up. So this is how they looked starting out. I actually really like this as a picture. Almost considered using this as the thumbnail. But how they end up is all in that central building that they've just moved into. So they've done their run. They've moved up to here and then back into here. And they're spread quite defensively throughout this building. It's actually not a bad strong point. The HMG has some very long lines of fire. And he's also got a Panzerfaust up against a window here, which is sort of similarly quite overlapping. And then the rest are just sort of like watching side angles of fire. It's genuinely, it's a really, really solid kind of fort kick-ass, with the note that the kind of pieces that he's using are ultimately single wound, some of them with regeneration. Now, I think if you were facing bigger, more dangerous guns, or you couldn't account for all of your opponent's threats, this would be a bit of a problem position. But he could. He's playing against Morats. He didn't have to worry about any hidden deployment or anything jumping on to ambush the team. And even if he did, they were deployed quite well. It's just that they were just like 50% more exposed to a template assault. And in particular, maybe the Tyrock and the Jawbrute could have done some damage. But he takes care of that with his second set of actions with the turn, which is that Tariq's team moves up and around here, and then Namur grabs this objective. Now, all of this is taken in terms of just like player efficiency, I think it's taken him maybe one more order than it might have if he'd done things a little more cleanly or he'd paused up a little bit less. But he's lost orders from that combat group, obviously. So he's running with 11 orders, and he's already done all of this with this fire team. And now he's moving up this fire team, which is well and good. And he grabs it. And we should have a chat here. I say, listen, you need to do some damage before you pull back. And so we think about what his offensive options are. And what he settles on is, after a bunch of moving around, this Tyrock has actually dodged to here and stood up to watch the fire team. And so he settles on, we're going to kill that Tyrock. And Tariq just deletes it, like it lights into damage 16. I will just destroy her. But she does pop on the way out, because of the way she's dodged. She's got a line of fight to the Quarries, and she cuts the Quarries down with an N2 shot, a T2 rifle shot. Now at this point, he doesn't quite have enough orders to do exactly what he wants, and he ends up pulling back to here, and that's basically fine. I think an alternate line of play might have been to pull back this way, have Tariq take a shot here against the paramedic before pulling back the rest of the way behind these camouflage markers. Now, the downside of doing that is that you would have been closer to the opponent, right? He's gotten all the way back behind this truck as it was, whereas behind this set of buildings here would not have been as far away from, say, this Harry's team here. But killing the paramedic might have really paid dividends. As it is, I've taken one casualty, not two. Those are the choices that were made. And all he's got is he just moves around some camouflage markers with his, which is generating one irregular order. So it's like, okay, the Beast Hunter identifies itself, but doesn't really do any damage because it only has one irregular order. My turn begins. So I jump this Datarazi over into the first group to fill it back up to 10, and we basically progress. Now, I kind of make a mistake here, which is that I've forgotten that this Golem has a Panzerfaust. But, so what I do is I lay some smoke down with this Datarazi, like that, and then the Yaugat moves forward so that it can see both of these big gun pieces. But I think this Golem has just a rifle, so I'm like, excellent, I can weaken the team by engaging it first and then maybe make it safe to engage the Zayadin. So I shoot the Golem, and he responds with Burst 2 Panzerfaust on 14s, and I go, oh yeah, that's right, you told me. You have a courtesy list right there that I didn't look at. And the Panzerfaust deletes. Hard deletes. All the way to dead. No chance of recovery, the Yaugat. That's on me. I still actually I think this Yaugat in these flexible Morat Harries teams might be kind of cool. But I don't get to see it do anything today. It's dead. It's not coming back. Rip Yaugat. And I realize at this point that I have 0 guns remaining. I think the closest thing I have to a gun left on the board is Kornak's Mark 12, a Burst 4 multi-rifle BS-12, and a Burst 4 combi rifle BS-11. I should probably have packed some bigger firepower. Now, that said, the Zerat bails me out. So she runs all the way along here, and she takes the face-to-face roll against this Golem hanging up against the window, who is in rifle range band. He's at a Panzerfaust, but he chooses his rifle, because why wouldn't he? It's the good range band. I should have just done this with the Zerat first. That Golem is down on ballistic skill 8. She's on 11s. She's burst 4. She's damage 14. And she knocks her unconscious. Doesn't kill it. Knocks her unconscious. There's a doctor in that room. That's fine. That is what I needed because it basically clears the way. I've smoked past this Zayda and it doesn't have line of fire onto this part of the table. So we can start to move. So we begin with the paramedic, which pops up to there. And then the Tuareg reveals itself. It lays down a shotgun. I decide that I have to probably just tank that shot, so I do, and I fire at it with my multi-rifle, trying to kill it, and inconclusive engagement. I take no damage, he takes no damage. I'm hitting on 6s, it isn't surprising. I don't want to just keep repeating that, and I want to move this team forward. So the Kaitok goes for a run. The Dartok just begins crawling forward, and the Kaitok comes all the way up and around here, and it gets to this doorway, and the Beast Hunter just chooses to hard reveal. It reveals in flamethrowers, hoping to stop the rampage. I once again have to get bailed out by my armor. I'll take the flamethrower hit, and I'll put 3 chain rifles damage 14 into you. And the chain rifles destroy the Beast Hunter all the way to dead. And the Kaitok's armor 5. It rolls a 10 or better. I think it rolled like a 12, but it needed a 10. Spangs the flamethrower hit. It then activates again, and it moves around to here. And it gets within 10 inches. And actually might even get within 8. The Tuareg templates it. It templates the Tuareg. It takes no damage. The Tuareg dies. So outstanding move already for the Kaitok. This is the kind of damage I expected to do. And it would have fired pistol shots if my opponents had elected to dodge. It had the Tuareg out of cover, albeit in bad range, so that would have been 3 dice on 6s. Actually, not necessarily ideal, but I was getting closer. One more order, and I'd have been 3 dice on 9s versus 1 dice on 12s if it was dodging. That's pretty okay. Also, I totally forget this for literally this entire time, but the paramedic could have formed a Harry's team with these models. I just didn't remember. Didn't remember until later in the turn. So I was leaving a lot of money on the table here, in particular when the paramedic now goes and engages Tariq Mansouri. And there's an inconclusive firefight, and then there's a firefight where I wound him, and he tries to guts, and he fails his religious guts roll, so he stays where he is. And then I shoot him again, and he goes unconscious. At this point, I'm very, very low on orders. I've accomplished a lot this turn, mostly thanks to the fact that Kornak plus the Osnat Link team is giving me this huge order pool. But we've got to actually get some runs on the board and get back to safety. So the paramedic picks up this objective, and the team basically pulls back and around to here. I form this up into a Harry. So it's a Dartok, Kaitok, Thingy, Rindak. Dartok, Kaitok, Rindak. Those are Pokemon. Dartok, Kaitok, Rindak, Harry's team. So I've gotten 1 box. My opponent still has 2. I've gotten 4 kills, which is pretty good. But importantly, one of them is my opponent's lieutenant. And his chain of command model died to the Tyrok the turn before. So he's in loss of lieutenant. Now, this does not necessarily hugely bother him. He basically pulls back to a defensive cordon and tries to recover his losses. I think if he'd had Tariq still intact, he might have been able to do some aggressive push, HMG, retreat play, but he doesn't. He's just going to use the orders he's got. Now, he's not in too bad of a shape. He's got 3 command tokens and 2 veteran troopers because the Zayden are veterans. And so what he does is he just begins pulling the fire team back this way. And he actually gets pretty unlucky. So first things though, the Zayden doctor, in order to just be efficient, is paramedicing troops, and he's landing hits. And the reason why he's landing hits is that he's rolling like 16s when he needs 16s, and he's rolling 10s when he needs 10s, or 13s when he needs 13s. And because BS12 base, the 5-man fire team is down to a 3-man fire team, woman fire team in some cases. But because it's a pure team, it's Zayden and Ghulam and Layla Sharif counts as a Ghulam, it's getting +1 ballistic skill. So the 4-trooper team, it's lost a bit thanks to dropping down from 5 troopers, but it hasn't lost that much. That's still if that Zayden had to take a fight, the HMG, it would be burst 5 functionally hitting on 16s, which is a better face-to-face roll than almost any tag, than any tag in the game will give you, than almost anything in the game will give you. That's a fantastic set of dice to roll with a heavy machine gun. So really interesting here how the loss of troops in a link actually is not, you don't feel it quite as much. You can lose a model and you're still at like solid capability. Now, I'm hiding from him at this point because I fully expected that Zayden to come and do some work, and so it's fine, he just pulls back. Now, he lands 2 paramedic hits on that downed Ghulam and fails both fizz rolls. That kind of sucks. He then also lands 2 paramedic hits on Tariq and fails both fizz rolls, which really sucks and is also super unlucky. So, in judging the outcome of this game, let's just bear that one in mind. The rest of what he does is basically like, okay, I've only got X many orders left, we're going to pull even further back, and basically he sets up this suppressive fire / link team cordon plus Fanus remotes, where he's just here. He is as far away from me as can be, hiding as much as can with the Fanus remotes beginning to peek out and take picket arrows. Now, the good news is I've got basically 2 turns to do as much damage as I can before recovering those boxes. So this game is in an eminently winnable state, and that's basically what happens. So this Harry's team here, it hands off, the Zerat's ended up there, it hands off a box to the Zerat, and then it runs down to this position here. And it kind of just sets up the Kaitok assault. And all I'm trying to do here is soften my opponent up, and ideally maybe the Kaitok will take wounds and I'll recover it. But the Kaitok just blasts through this area. Burst 4, damage 14 chain rifles, or burst 4, damage 15 heavy pistols. shred light infantry teams that have to just take hits against him. They have to stop him, right? Or he'll just keep fighting. And I've got a big order pool. They put him down, but the Ghulam, they lose 2 Ghulams and these they lose, so 2 Ghulam die, and the Zayden HMD goes unconscious in the act of killing the Kaitok. Now it does go all the way to dead, so I can't recover it. I don't have quite enough. Like basically, I've got like 2 orders left at this point. I could move up and try and kill the Zayden HMG to dead. To do so, I would need to expose my paramedic and probably not be able to pull it back. Instead, what I do is I spend the last 2 orders just moving the Osnat team part of the way forward, and I chuck the paramedic, the Robotnik, the Rindak into suppressive fire, and I hang out with the Dartok next to it as a hacking area. My opponent is not in Loss of Lieutenant the last turn. They've made the Doctor their Lieutenant, so they haven't suffered under the turn of Loss of Lieutenant, but they've only really got like 4 or 5 troopers left. Some chaff, basically. They doctor back the HMG, which gets, they decline to regenerate it, they doctor it instead, which gets them quite neatly their experimental drug classified. But that's about it. It's just HMG goes into suppressive, Namur goes into suppressive. They make themselves as hard to kill as they can. The Namur has a firefight with suppressive fire Rindak and basically like puts it on its back feet. It's kind of inconsequential, but I'm afraid to attack with it any further. But I'm holding 1 box with the Zerat, and I've got the last turn. So the last turn is a really solid one. The Zerat kind of just showboats at this point. She kills this Fanus remote because she can. I'm afraid to actually fight a suppressive fire Zayden with her, although she maybe could if she wasn't holding an objective box. But really what happens this turn is this. This is the march of the Osnat fire team. It has been far, far too long since I have stormed a 6/6 speed linked team of alien Gribblies up the table, and let me tell you, it felt pretty good. I didn't realize how much, like the first 2 turns, they were just an order battery. I did not realize how much I had missed this. Yep, okay, it's not a pure link. Kornak, obviously, it can never be a pure link because it's an Osnat and Hungary's. Kornak is only BS-15. He's not actually, he's there for orders. He can gunfight if he has to. Don't want to expose him to any risk. But this is about the Gribblies. So in basically 2 orders, they pretty much push from this position here to here, including laying smoke. They are so fast. They are so fast. And then all I really have to do to win is I have to put that Namur down. And so I just like surround the Namur and the Garki. So I break the link at that point because they've been delivered. I've delivered the Pretas and the Garkis, and a Garki berserks in, and that's actually enough. That does it. I follow up with some Pretas. Basically, I do a coup de grace. And because she's got 2 wounds now rather than no wounding cap, she doesn't go to dead, she goes to unconscious, which means I can coup de grace her for my extreme prejudice classified, pick up the box, and I basically don't have enough. Like I've got some orders left. I could make a suicide run in on the Zayden Doctor holding the objective, but it would be showboating. I've got 7 points. I've got more than enough to win the game. I've had a really good time. So we just we leave it there. I got to try all of the things that I wanted. So overall conclusions. I repeat, this was not a good list. I'm beginning to get the feel for how I like to play Morats. I think there are a few different ways. I've got a heavy core link that is a serious pain train that I want to try, but I probably won't get much of a chance to because locally we are all practicing for an event coming up in June called Nova Corps, and Nova Corps' mission mix thoroughly precludes just playing Annihilation. It's much too challenging a mission mix for that to be allowed. We've got things like Comm Center from ITS 10, countermeasures, supremacy, which you can kind of play as Annihilation-ish, but supplies, for example. So I'm going to have to play much more of a hybrid and sort of like more adaptive theme. I may not play Morat Aggression Force, but I'm going to practice for these scenarios in any case. But I've got probably one of the next lists I want to try is almost an I can't believe it's not Tohar list, where Morat can run 2 Haris and you can run a 3-person core. And I've got a list that trades on that idea a little bit, and I'm pretty excited for it. I think it could be really good for scenarios like countermeasures. So we're going to give that a shot. I may post up a battle report for it. We will see. I've done a couple of these in 2 days. I'm hella tired. But yeah, first thoughts for Morat Aggression Force, just in general conclusion. Firstly, High watermark firepower is something that you will struggle to really, really get into a list if you're going for vulnerability and so versatility and a wide set of options. You can get, say, a BS-15 Burst 5 Yaugat shooting through smoke. That's pretty good. You can get a BS-16 Burst 5 heavy machine gun if you core link a HMG. That's pretty good. But like the Zayden was rolling that in a 4-person link. So we'll sort of say you can still have some like chunky AROs. You can have a Suryat HRL on Overwatch if you want something like that. But I don't think I'm going to play focused around big core link teams that much. I like the fact that you can mix and match them almost as much as you can Toha. Look at that. 2022 is the year of the Toha. They just come in monkey form now. And there are a ton of really interesting profiles. The Zerat performed excellently. The Kaitok performed excellently. We know that the Dartoks are good. The Yaugat kind of failed pretty badly this game, but there are a whole slot of things that can go in that Harry's team, and I think the Yaugat is still a perfectly good one. I want to try using Anyat in different links, including the Yaugat link, because a link that brings its own smoke and its own good MSV2 shooting is awesome. So tons to explore there. I'm not sure Morat's reach the high watermark at any particular spot, but they've got a lot of flexibility. It's a really professional army. Of course, they are all veterans, which has those like incidental bonuses. Your HI can't be isolated, stuff like that. And there's a lot of like power if you look for it. And it's really Morat power. It's like close assault and like muscular power that's not just rounds down range. So super awesome. Really enjoyed them. Look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for the next one.